sort of high-end presentation of what can be done. Go to something a little more mundane, but nevertheless public domain. Particularly here in the state of California, we have many thousands of people in prison. We have one of the largest prison populations in the world. I started visiting prisons about 20 years ago. It's been a wonderful experience. They have taught me a lot. It is the only time in my teaching career where when I first went into the prison, one of them raised his hand and said, "Are you trained enough to teach us? What is your background?" No student had ever asked me that before, but I thought that was an indication of the purity, almost, that you can find among people who have nothing. They have no money. They have no clothes that they own. Some of them have been in prison for decades without a visit, without a single piece of mail, no contact with the outside world. Sitting beside me is someone who is transforming Buddhism in the prison environment. Venerable D has developed a program which goes up and down this state. He is one of the busiest people I know. He's on the road every day. He drives thousands of miles every month to go to more than 24 prisons throughout the state. And he has brought with him 2 of the people that have worked with him in the prisons and have now returned to normal life, if this can be called normal. So I'm really happy to introduce you to Venerable D. He is one of the current bodhisattvas in the world. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Lancaster. First of all, I also want to thank Ajahn Guan. When I started my prison work, I listened to one of your talks on your prison experience. And I tried to look for more, but I think you hit it somewhere. Anyway, when I first started, I wasn't sure what I got myself into. It's a mess, and it's still a mess. Just so you know, as Dr. Lancaster said, we only have 4% of the world's population, but we do have 25% of the world's prisons. Currently, we have 2.2 million people in the prisons, in federal and state and county, costing us at least $80 billion a year. In California alone, this year the budget by CDCR. CDCR is an acronym for the California Department of Correction and Rehabilitation. The budget for 2019, $12.5 billion, locking up 128,000 men and women in the prison. Do you know how much it costs on average? $81,203 per person, which is more than sending a student to here or to Stanford. We have 35 state prisons in California and 7 private prisons. If you take Fresno as the middle ground, going up north you have 16 prisons, down south you have 19. Out of the prisons up north, there are 3 that have no visits. They have no volunteer. Down south, there's a non-profit up north. It's called Buddhist Pathways. They specialize in going to the other 13 prisons. Down south, I go to 7. My colleague, he went to 1. There's another non-profit called IBS, International Bodhisattva. They go to some of the prisons that we go to. So there are lots of prisons in California that have no visit from Buddhist volunteers. And you know why? Because Buddhism is not considered a religion under the state of California. That's why you don't have paid Buddhist chaplains in the prison. And I can only go once a month because 4 of the prisons that I go to, they are 200 miles away, each way, for the past 6 years. Chino, which is closest, I would go every Monday for the past 3 years. So why do people get arrested? Why do people commit crimes, right? If you hear the stories from these people, and actually let me pause a little bit, my hope, just so that I forget at the end. My hope in talking to you guys is to change at least the American public perception about prisoners, and for you to have a second look at them. They are humans, just like us. We are one step away, to be honest, from being sent to prisons. In America, if you are poor, chances are you get sent to prison if you did something minor. If you are poor and a minority, you double your chances. If you are poor, if you're a minority, if you have mental illness, you triple your chances of being sent to prison, period. So, and I'm not trying to get political, but anyway, if you hear stories of a 7-year-old girl molested by her uncle who was a policeman. So as she grew up, she was a mess, and whatever that she did, she got sent to prison. She would meet the guards, the CO or correctional officers. She also was traumatized because the uniform. The story of a 5-year-old boy who was molested by her uncle. This or teenager who was constantly beaten by his father with a leather belt. So his back was constantly ingrained with his father's last name because the belt has his father's last name. Or the story of a boy eating dinner, chopstick would fly into his face. These are the stories of the people that I work with. So if you look at the stats about traumas, or that's the general term for people who were abused. Back in 1999, in state prisons, 19% of men were abused, physically, emotionally, and sexually. 40% of women were sexually abused. And don't forget, men and women, when they suffer sexually abuse and molestation, they don't talk about it. It went silent for decades because of shame, because nobody would believe them. That's why you see the Me Too movement. Okay? So once they get into prison, don't forget that they also suffer from further traumas, witnessing violence, how they were treated. Our government treated each prisoner as a piece of property, and it stated so on the documents. And then, so, once they get to prison, once they get out, and you guys know what? Chances are they head back to the prison. The recidivist rates in the US in general, within 3 years, 68% of them get sent back to prison. Within 6 years, 79%. Within 9 years, 83%. So think about the $12.5 billion that we spent, as most of you are taxpayers in California. Within 9 years, all of that went down to drain. So what happened? The other thing that, so we have the cost, we have prisoners who were traumatized, and then we have the prisoners who are released, since they're coming back. What I call the unintended consequences is that the correctional officers, do you guys know their longevity? 58 years. So if they could work 20 years when they could retire, once they retire, they would die from the stress. And they have the highest suicide rate. 10% of correctional officers commit suicide. And actually this study was done by UC Berkeley, one of the professors. So my point is, how do I bring? When I first started, I had no idea what I was doing. So you can't just tell people to pray, to meditate, because they have wounded. You've been wounded, you know. So I try to come up with different teachings to help them deal with that. So to see how the Dharma has changed people, I will introduce you to Sunshine. I met her in 2016, and she has been out. She lives in the Bay Area. And then Billy Tang, I met him more than 6 years ago in Chakawala.